The chandeliers bathed the ballroom in golden light, illuminating the polished marble floors and the glint of champagne flutes raised in effortless toasts. It was the kind of event that had defined my childhood, a grand spectacle where power was measured in firm handshakes and half-hidden smirks, where the most ruthless people in the room were the ones smiling the widest. My mother, Vivian Carter, thrived in this world. She was its queen, orchestrating every movement, every conversation, every carefully curated moment. And tonight, I was certain she would have no choice but to acknowledge me. For the past year, I had poured every waking hour into the automated predictive system I designed, an innovation so powerful it would redefine investment forecasting, placing Carter Financial Solutions at the forefront of the financial industry. The company had been deteriorating for years, struggling against tech-driven firms that outpaced its traditional strategies. My system was the answer. My system was the future. I had never sought praise, but this was different. This wasn't about ego. It was about proving that I was more than just the quiet, overlooked daughter who preferred data over boardrooms. My brother, Richard Carter, had always been the golden child, the one groomed to inherit the empire. But tonight, for the first time, I had something he didn't. I had saved this company. As I sipped my champagne, I waited for the moment my name would be called. The numbers on the massive screen behind the stage were undeniable. Profits soaring, investor confidence at an all-time high. My work had done this. My mind had built this future. Then my mother's voice cut through the air, smooth and deliberate. Tonight, we celebrate transformation, innovation, and a new vision for Carter Financial Solutions. My pulse quickened. This was it. She turned toward Richard. My heart stopped. None of this would have been possible without the strategic leadership of my son, Richard Carter. She continued, her tone unwavering. His vision and commitment have secured our future. It is with great pride that I recognize his contributions. The words barely registered before a ceremonial check was presented. $3 million, a leadership bonus for my brother, for his success. The applause erupted around me, the room rising in ovation. I sat motionless, my glass hovering just below my lips, my breath shallow. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to react, to stand up, to speak, to demand that they see me. But I had learned long ago that in this family, emotion was a liability. Outbursts were ammunition for the enemy. So I smiled. I lifted my glass in a silent toast, my expression carefully measured, my mind splintering under the weight of the moment. I had spent a lifetime being invisible, but this was something else entirely. This was a deliberate erasure, a calculated theft. I had spent nights hunched over my computer, writing thousands of lines of code, refining models, solving impossible problems. I had designed, built, and implemented the one thing keeping this company afloat. And yet I wasn't even worth a mention. The whispers started as I moved through the crowd, pity disguised as admiration. Brilliant work on the system, someone murmured. Your brother is lucky to have such a talent on his team. His team. I felt a cold certainty settle in my chest. They knew. Everyone here knew. They knew Richard had done nothing, that this innovation had been mine alone. And yet they had accepted this lie without hesitation, because that was how the world worked. The name on the check mattered more than the hands that built the future. But what none of them realized, what my mother, my brother, and every guest in this room remained blissfully unaware of, was that I had never legally transferred ownership of the AI system to Carter Financial Solutions. Tomorrow morning, When they attempted to deploy it fully, they would discover the truth. And when that moment came, I would no longer be the quiet, overlooked daughter. I would be the one holding all the power. The morning after the gala felt different, not just because of the exhaustion that clung to me after a night of forced smiles and hollow congratulations, but because something inside me had fundamentally shifted. The weight of realization pressed down on me as I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The events of the night before replaying in my mind. The applause, the check, the way my mother had effortlessly erased me from my own achievements. The company had been on the verge of collapse, but that didn't matter. The work I had done didn't matter. Only the name attached to the success did. For as long as I could remember, my mother had positioned Richard as the heir to the Carter financial empire, the golden child, groomed for leadership, while I had been set aside, valued only for my intelligence, but never for my ability to lead. He had been trained in the art of negotiation, finance, and influence, while I had been dismissed as a brilliant but impractical thinker, someone better suited for the background than the boardroom. My father had been the only one who had seen me differently. He had told me that I saw patterns no one else did, that my mind worked in a way that could change the world. He had believed in me, but when he died, his voice was lost, drowned out by my mother's control. With him gone, my place in the company had been decided, before I had even stepped foot in it. Richard was given leadership training, direct mentorship, and the confidence that came with knowing he was destined for greatness. I was given an office in the IT department, tucked away from the rooms where real decisions were made. My ideas were dismissed, my proposals rejected before they could be considered. I had been told that Carter Financial Solutions was built on relationships, not numbers. That clients wanted to trust a face, not an algorithm. That technology would never replace the instincts of a seasoned investor. And yet, 6 months ago, it had become painfully clear that those instincts had failed. The company was hemorrhaging money, struggling against more innovative competitors who had embraced the power of predictive analytics. Investors were pulling away, questioning if the firm could survive in a world that was evolving without them. I had seen the writing on the wall long before anyone else. I had watched the patterns unfold and had understood that if Carter Financial Solutions didn't adapt, it would die. That was when I had made my move. I had already been developing the system in secret for nearly a year, refining it in stolen hours, crafting an algorithm so precise that it could predict market trends with unmatched accuracy. When I finally presented my mother with the concept, she had dismissed it outright, laughing at the notion that a machine could do what generations of financial leaders had built through experience and instinct. It was only when desperation crept into her carefully controlled facade that she had allowed me 6 months to prove it. And I had. The results were immediate. Within weeks of testing, the company's performance had improved. Within months, it had become undeniable that the AI system had single-handedly reversed their downward spiral. The company was no longer struggling to keep up with the competition. It was outpacing them. And yet, despite that, last night had proven what I had always known. In my mother's eyes, Richard had been responsible for the company's turnaround. He had been given the praise, the recognition, and the financial reward. My contribution had been neatly packaged as a technical advancement, a tool that had assisted in the process, but not defined it. Even knowing all of that, I had still held on to some thread of hope that my work would finally be valued. That was why, when I was summoned to the boardroom the next morning, I went. I had assumed it was a conversation about the next phase of development, about what would come next now that the system was fully integrated. I had expected a discussion, perhaps even a reluctant acknowledgement, that my role was important. Instead, I found myself sitting across from Richard and my mother, a contract placed neatly in front of me. The room was heavy with expectation, with the unspoken assumption that I would do what was required of me. They wanted full ownership, not just for the system I had built, but for any future developments, any refinements, any new technology that could evolve from it. A total transfer, ensuring that what I had created would belong to the company and never to me. In that moment, I understood exactly how little I had ever meant to them. I had given everything I had to create something revolutionary, and now they expected me to sign it away. Without hesitation, they had taken my work, my success, and assigned it to someone else without a second thought. And now they wanted to erase me completely. I refused. I had expected anger, but what I received instead was something far colder. My mother had never needed to yell to make her intentions clear. A second document was handed to me, and before I even read it, I knew I was being removed. Effective immediately, my position at Carter Financial Solutions no longer existed. I was being cut out entirely, severed from the company as if I had never been there at all. I walked out of that boardroom with nothing but a folder of legal papers and the weight of betrayal sitting heavy on my chest. But what they didn't know, what they hadn't even considered, was that I still held the real power. I had never signed over ownership of the system. As far as they were concerned, it belonged to Carter Financial Solutions. But tomorrow, they would learn the truth. The moment I left Carter Financial Solutions, the weight of betrayal bore down on me like a crushing force, but beneath the initial shock, something else took hold, cold, calculated fury. I had spent my entire career proving my worth, ensuring that my name would one day stand alongside the greatest innovators in the financial sector. Yet in a single stroke, my mother and brother had stolen everything from me. They expected me to disappear, to retreat in disgrace, to accept that Carter Financial Solutions was not mine to claim. They had no idea what was coming. The first call I made was to Samantha Reed, one of the most formidable intellectual property attorneys in the country. Samantha had built her reputation by dismantling corporate giants that attempted to steal what wasn't theirs. When she picked up, I barely needed to explain. She already knew. The news had spread fast. The golden heir of Carter Financial Solutions had been rewarded for a revolutionary AI system that had, in truth, been built by someone else. By the time our call ended, a cease and desist order was already in motion. Within 24 hours, Carter Financial Solutions was legally barred from deploying the AI system. The very foundation of their success was now locked behind a legal blockade, a blockade that I controlled. The financial world erupted. By midday, investors were demanding answers. Clients who had relied on Carter Financial's forecasting capabilities now saw uncertainty on the horizon. Stock prices tumbled. The company that had been celebrating the night before was now fighting to maintain its grip on the market. And I watched, unseen as chaos unraveled the empire my mother had spent decades perfecting. But Vivian Carter had never been the kind of woman to lose gracefully. Her retaliation came swiftly, and it struck at the very foundation of everything I had built. I didn't notice it at first, the missed calls from recruiters, the emails that had once been filled with offers suddenly going silent. But then the rumors began to surface. I saw my name appear in articles, carefully constructed whispers masquerading as concern. Brilliant but unstable. A mind ahead of its time, but prone to erratic behavior. The story was spreading. Elena Carter, the unbalanced genius, the woman who couldn't handle pressure, the one whose brilliance came with too much risk. My mother had wielded the most effective weapon she had, perception. In an industry built on trust, She was ensuring that no one trusted me. She reached out to former professors, old mentors, key figures in the tech world, people who had once championed my work. One by one, they began to distance themselves, their voices growing cautious, their recommendations disappearing. I was being systematically erased. But if my mother had taught me anything, it was that power didn't belong to those who played fair. It belonged to those who played smart. Instead of trying to fight for my place in an industry that had already begun shutting its doors on me, I went to the one company that had been waiting for an opportunity to destroy Carter Financial Solutions. Nexus Capital. They had spent years trailing behind, always second place to my family's empire. They had watched as Carter Financial secured the most valuable clients, as my mother and Richard paraded their influence across the industry. And now I had exactly what they needed to take the top spot. I reached out to Daniel Langley, CEO of Nexus Capital, and by the time I finished explaining my position, he didn't hesitate. He had followed the headlines, had seen my mother's carefully spun lies, but he also knew the truth. Within 48 hours, I had an offer in hand, a multi-million-dollar licensing deal that would grant Nexus exclusive access to the AI technology that Carter Financial Solutions could no longer touch. The moment the deal went public, Carter Financial Solutions descended into panic. Investors who had placed their faith in the company were now witnessing their greatest competitor acquiring the very technology that had made Carter Financial untouchable. Clients started reconsidering their loyalty. The financial world was watching, waiting, and I could already see the cracks forming. But Richard and my mother weren't finished. Instead of negotiating, they chose total war. The next morning, I received an official lawsuit from Carter Financial Solutions. The claim, they alleged that the AI system had been developed using company resources, making it theirs by right. They argued that my work had been conducted under their name, that my employment contract had placed every innovation I created under their ownership. It was a desperate move, but desperate people were dangerous. This wasn't just about reclaiming the technology. It was a calculated attempt to bleed me dry, to drag me through a legal war that could exhaust my resources, my time, and my reputation. If they couldn't win, they would destroy me instead. I had spent my life believing that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, I would finally earn my place at the table. But now I understood the truth. They had never planned to let me win. They had never planned to see me as an equal. I had been so busy trying to earn their acceptance that I had failed to see what I was truly capable of. Now they had made their biggest mistake. I wasn't fighting for recognition anymore. I was fighting to burn their empire to the ground. Every document, every line of proof, the timestamps, the data logs, the original source code, everything was mine. The AI had been developed outside of company time, outside of their infrastructure. Samantha worked relentlessly, compiling an airtight legal defense, countering every false claim, dismantling every attempt they made to twist the facts. And as the lawsuit escalated, so did my resolve. I had nothing left to lose, so I did what I had always done. I adapted. This wasn't just about protecting what I had built anymore. This was about proving to them and to the world that they had never owned me to begin with. The legal battle escalated into a war, one that neither side could afford to lose. Carter Financial Solutions poured millions into its attack, hiring the best legal minds money could buy, attempting to drown me in litigation before the case even saw a courtroom. They pushed aggressively, filing motions, demanding depositions, trying to exhaust my resources before I could strike back. But I had built my defense with the same precision that I had built my AI. The evidence was irrefutable. I had documented every stage of development, every version, every refinement, every late-night breakthrough, logged and time-stamped. I had never used company servers, never coded a single line on Carter Financial's time. 78% of the AI's development had been done in my personal workspace on my personal hardware. The remaining 22%, minor refinements made during work hours, but nothing substantial enough to classify the system as company property. And the final inescapable truth, the patent, was in my name, not Richard's, not my mother's, not Carter Financial Solutions, mine. The moment Samantha presented the patent in court, the tide shifted. Their entire case hinged on the claim that the AI had been developed under their ownership. That argument collapsed in seconds. The pressure began fracturing Carter Financial Solutions from the inside. The board was furious, questioning how my mother and Richard had allowed the company to stake its future on technology they did not legally own. Investors, already rattled, began pulling out. Clients started looking elsewhere, uneasy about placing their trust in a company embroiled in scandal. Vivian Carter had built an empire on power and control, and for the first time in her life, she was losing both. I expected her to fight harder, to throw everything she had into crushing me. Instead, she did something I never saw coming. She tried to buy me out. The offer came in quietly, delivered through her legal team as though it were an afterthought. $10 million, a full payout, a chance to walk away with enough money to never have to fight another day in my life. All they wanted was full ownership of the AI, a clean slate for Carter Financial Solutions to move forward without me standing in the way. To anyone else, it would have been the perfect deal. But they didn't understand. This was never about money. If I had wanted wealth, I could have taken Nexus Capital's offer and watched Carter Financial crumble from a distance. But I wasn't interested in revenge from the sidelines. I wanted something far more valuable than a check. I wanted control. I rejected the offer without hesitation. I could imagine the rage that must have crossed my mother's face when she heard. She had spent her entire life believing that money was the only language that mattered, but I wasn't playing by her rules anymore. Then came the unexpected twist, one I never could have predicted. Arthur Hale, one of the most influential members of the Carter Financial Board, a man who had built his fortune in investment strategy decades ago, requested a private meeting with me. I had never considered him an ally. He had always been one of my mother's staunchest supporters, someone who had watched from the shadows as she shaped Carter Financial into a dominant force. But in our meeting, he revealed the truth. He had been watching me for years. He had seen how my ideas were dismissed, how my innovations were buried under the weight of my family's arrogance. And quietly, without ever saying a word, he had been backing me. He proposed something radical. A complete restructuring of Carter Financial Solutions. The company would split into two entities. Richard would maintain control over CFS traditional investments, the core of the family business built on the relationships and financial models they had always used. But the AI division, my division, would break away into its own entity. Carter AI Innovations, and I would lead it. It was a strategic move, one that would prevent total collapse. If Carter Financial continued fighting me, they would lose everything. But if they adapted, if they let go of the notion that they could control me, they might just survive. When the proposal was presented to the board, the reaction was immediate. Some saw it as a betrayal, others saw it as the only way forward. My mother, she saw it as a death sentence. For the first time in her career, she was backed into a corner. If she refused, the company would fall apart. Without the AI system, Carter Financial had no competitive edge. Clients would leave. Investors would abandon them. She had no choice. With a look of barely concealed hatred, Vivian Carter was forced to sign the agreement. And with that signature, I became the CEO of Carter AI Innovations. I didn't just win, I took the future from their hands and made it my own. Becoming the CEO of Carter AI Innovations had been a victory, but it was not the end of the war. The moment I took control, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. While I had won my independence, my former family's company, Carter Financial Solutions, was unraveling without me. The AI system had been the backbone of their resurgence, and without it, their investment models were failing. Clients who had been drawn in by the technology's predictive accuracy were frustrated by its sudden absence. The investors who had rallied behind my brother, Richard, were losing confidence by the day. I could see it happening in real time. Carter Financial Solutions was crumbling. Meanwhile, Carter AI Innovations was thriving. Within months, we had secured partnerships with 3 of the biggest investment firms in the industry, all eager to integrate the technology that had once been exclusive to Carter Financial Solutions. My name was no longer tied to my mother's legacy. It was becoming its own force in the financial world. But Vivian Carter had never been one to accept defeat. As my success grew, so did her desperation. My mother had spent her entire career manipulating the world around her, ensuring that she was always the one in control. She couldn't stand the idea that I had outmaneuvered her, that I had built something greater than she ever imagined. That was when the final betrayal came. One evening, I received an anonymous tip. At first, I dismissed it as a false lead, but then the details became too specific to ignore. Someone had leaked my AI's core algorithms, the very foundation of my technology, to a rival firm, a company that had been trying for years to match Carter AI's precision had somehow gained access to my proprietary work. The implications were staggering. I spent the next few days conducting a full internal investigation, combing through every digital footprint, every access log. And then I found the undeniable truth. It was her. Vivian Carter, the woman who had spent her life building an empire, had betrayed her own blood one final time. She had leaked the AI's proprietary data, thinking that if she couldn't control it, she would at least ensure that I couldn't either. She had believed that by spreading the technology, she would weaken my grip on the industry, but she had miscalculated. Instead of crippling me, she had just handed me the very weapon I needed to end her reign for good. I didn't hesitate. Within hours, I went public with the evidence. I released proof of her direct involvement, documenting the leak, the emails, the transactions, everything. It wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a violation of corporate ethics, a breach of boardroom trust, a scandal that would destroy her credibility forever. The fallout was immediate. Investors withdrew support overnight. Carter Financial Solutions Board of Directors convened an emergency session, and before the end of the week, Vivian Carter was forced to resign from the company she had spent decades building. She had been completely removed from the board, her influence erased. For the first time in her life, she had lost control. But as the dust settled, Richard faced a new reality. His division was bleeding money. Without the AI system, his investment firm was failing. Clients were pulling out, and with our mother gone, he was losing his strongest ally. That was when he finally reached out to me. I could see the hesitation in his message, the pride that was still wounded, but he understood the truth. Without Carter AI Innovations, Carter Financial Solutions had no future. He proposed a deal. Instead of continuing the war, he suggested that Carter Financial Solutions become the first major client of Carter AI Innovations. They would pay for access to the very technology they once claimed was theirs. It was the final admission of defeat. But I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in winning. I agreed to the deal, but on my terms. Carter Financial Solutions would have to sign a long-term licensing contract, one that guaranteed their reliance on my company. The agreement would lock them into my technology, ensuring that they would never again have the power to undermine me. For the first time in my life, I held all the power. I had built my own empire. I had taken what was mine. And now the very company that had tried to destroy me was completely dependent on me. I had outlasted them all. 6 months later, Carter AI Innovations was no longer just a rising star in the industry. It was the dominant force. The company had surpassed every expectation, securing high-profile clients and revolutionizing AI-driven investment forecasting. Valued at over $600 million, it was no longer tied to the Carter name. It was my name that carried power now. The night of the Tech Innovation Awards was a blur of flashing cameras, murmured congratulations, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that every step had led me to this moment. As I stepped onto the stage to accept the award for pioneering advancements in AI-driven financial modeling, I felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, not revenge, something stronger, validation. I no longer needed to prove my worth to anyone. I had built something indestructible. As I stepped down from the stage, moving through the sea of industry leaders and innovators, I saw her. Vivian Carter. She stood near the back of the room, watching. The woman who had once controlled my fate, who had decided that I would never be worthy of leading her empire, now had no empire left to rule. I approached, and for the first time in my life, she looked uncertain. There was no more calculating sharpness in her eyes, no quiet condescension, just resignation. I underestimated you, she finally admitted, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. I did what I had to do to protect the family legacy, a justification. A final attempt to make herself the victim of her own downfall. I met her gaze unflinching, and I built the future you were too afraid to see. There was nothing left to say after that. She had spent her life believing that power was something inherited, something passed down through legacy and control. But power had never been in the name. It had always been in the hands that built something from nothing. As she turned and walked away, I felt no bitterness, no anger. I had already won. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about destroying my enemies. It was about proving that I had always been more than they ever believed. And the best way to win, to take your rightful place. Because no one can take away what you've built with your own hands. The world isn't fair. It never has been. There will always be people who take credit for what they didn't build, who manipulate the rules to keep others in the background, who decide that some voices matter more than others. But the truth? Power doesn't belong to those who inherit it. It belongs to those who create it. In every industry, in every corner of life, there are Elena Carters, brilliant, capable individuals who are ignored, underestimated, or erased. They do the work, they build the systems, they create the future, and yet when the moment of recognition comes, someone else stands on the stage taking the credit. But the world is changing. Those who once held control, the gatekeepers, the old guard, the ones who built empires on stolen ideas, are losing their grip. Now knowledge is power, documentation is power, ownership is power. The ones who protect their work, who refuse to be silent, who fight for what is theirs, they are the ones who win in the end. Not through revenge, not through destruction, but by becoming so undeniable that the world has no choice but to recognize them. Because the best way to win isn't by tearing others down. It's by proving that they were never strong enough to stop you. If you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more.